people a few minutes to come in. All right, I think we can get started. Welcome, everybody. This is a Scrum.org webinar talking about exploring the different ways people learn today. We'll have a little bit of a panel discussion. We're going to specifically talk a little bit more in depth about immersion learning and that type of format that Scrum.org is now offering. And get started. A few quick logistics before we dive in. Just so you all know, your microphones will be muted throughout the session today, but please do feel free to ask questions. You can ask your questions using the Q&A feature in Zoom, and the session will be recorded, so you can go back and listen afterwards if you need to drop out for any reason. The recording will be available, I think, immediately once we're done today. And yeah, definitely please feel free to ask questions. Just a little bit about Scrum.org if you're not super familiar with us. Our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. And we do this, well, we try to do this a little bit better each day through training, through ongoing learning through our website, which you may be familiar with, and also through certification and validation. Specifically, what we're talking about today is learning formats. It's something very near and dear to my heart. My name, by the way, I should introduce myself. My name is Sabrina Love. I am the product owner of Courseware at Scrum.org. So this is very near and dear to my heart. I'm always, my personal mission is trying to make our training more practical and actually helping people have a positive impact in their real world work environments. So how can they take what we're hoping to teach and apply that at work and make a difference, make a positive difference? So how does that relate to learning formats and training specifically, and what Scrum.org is about? We have noticed over the past couple of years through conversations with students, with our professional Scrum trainers, just through conversations all over the place, that training is, the standard form of training is consecutive days, generally. Maybe it's a 2-day course that's split up over 4 days. Maybe it's a 2-day course over 2 days. Either way, it's consecutive. There's a lot of information that people get really quickly, all at once. And it can be a little bit challenging to take that information and parse it into an actionable list of things to do once you go back to work. Where do you start? So we're seeing a lot of conversations about that, and I've had a personal experience with that myself, actually, where, my first day as a product owner, I've been doing this about 2 years, but my very first day as a product owner, I had no idea where to start. I knew a lot of things. I had a lot of knowledge, I think, that I gained from the courses, that it's from Scrum.org courses, which were amazing experiences and helped me build that base knowledge. But on day one, where do I start? So that's my personal experience with it. Where we're hoping to affect some positive change in the training environment, or at least in some of the offerings from Scrum.org, is how do we make these learning experiences more practical? How do we extend the learning engagement to include some application and reflection? So what we're trying to get at is application. How do we help training be more practical? And like I just mentioned, so we're extending the learning process. That's what we're talking about. We want to go from just reaching a level of understanding through learning and practicing in a classroom to application and reflection. And those two parts of the learning process, I believe, are key to actually gaining skills and being able to affect positive change, especially the reflection part. Once you've tried something, being able to go back and reflect on that and learn and improve is really key to that experience. So what immersion programs, the mission that we're hoping to accomplish with immersion programs is enabling students to apply their learning to their real world settings during their participation in a course. So this is something that Scrum.org is offering now. It's available on our website. There's public trainings available there. If you're looking for a private engagement, you can of course reach out to us and ask about that. What we're going to do today is dig into, we have a few special guests with us today, some professional Scrum trainers from all over the world. And we're going to dig into what experiences have they encountered delivering immersion training, what have they heard and experienced from students in their classrooms, and how has that helped students affect positive change. So a few quick things about immersion training, right? If you're not familiar with it, because it is something new, it's an experiment that we're running. What we mean by application and reflection is there's a couple different components of an immersion training program, right? There's classroom sessions, and those are of course based on existing Scrum.org courses. You still spend time in the classroom with a professional Scrum trainer. You still learn and practice in the classroom. There is the addition of, or the extension of the learning process, which includes these intersession assignments. And these build on the learning outcomes of the course, of the session that you were just in that day. So once you've learned something and you've practiced it in the classroom, go back to your real world work environment and try something small. And once you've done that, you'll come back for another session, and you'll begin that session with a reflection of how that went. And then you'll continue that iteratively until the end of the course. All right. So that was just a really brief introduction to what we're talking about today, right? We're going to get deeper. We have a few guests with us today, like I mentioned. These are all professional Scrum trainers. We have Joanna, Alex, and Martin. Would you actually take a few seconds, each of you, to introduce yourselves? We'll start with Joanna.
Yes, sure. So my name is Joanna, Juana, choose your version. I'm based in Poland, and I'm a professional Scrum trainer teaching in both Polish and English. I'm also learning new things, how to improve the learning experience, for instance, Agile Kata, action learning, and I'm super interested in this today's conversation because I love the concept of immersion classes.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanna. Alex, how about you?
Okay, my name is Alex Ballarin. I live in Barcelona, and I teach professional Scrum courses all around Spain and Europe, both in Spanish and English. And I've been doing consulting and training, and I think, as we will see during this webinar, that immersion programs allow a blend of two, both training and consulting in a new way. So, yeah.
Thank you, Alex. And Martin.
Yep. My name's Martin Hinshelwood. I'm obviously a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org. I'm also a Pro Kanban trainer and a Microsoft MVP in DevOps. I spend a lot of time training and consulting, and I think that the immersive learning format is the future of all training, and I think hopefully we'll get to why. At least I think that, and I think everybody else does as well.
It is very near and dear, for sure. Thank you all. Yeah, so let's dig into the why, right? I would love to hear, actually, going back for half a second to the standard way of learning and which format you would actually recommend for different types of learners. Because I know I've had a personal experience with a standard way of learning, and I still think it was very valuable. I would love to know what each of you thinks about, which format would be better for which type of learner, because obviously our standard courses are still awesome, right? They're still valuable for people, and this is a different way of learning for a different type of learner. So Alex, would you please help us dive into that?
Sure. I've been teaching in person since 2010 or 11, and I really loved the experiences we had with them, and we started improving our way of teaching or graphic facilitation, interacting, and so on. But suddenly, and at the same time, as I was saying before, suddenly I was doing consulting, and they were like two separate worlds. Okay, so was doing intensive and very immersive at the same time experiences in class and also teaching. Sorry, doing consulting at the customers. And that was the way I was doing with my customers. But suddenly the pandemic appeared. We started to do the training online, and I just discovered that the super interesting live or in-person training could be also replaced as well for distant learning, synchronous, and we started to improve that, and I discovered that we could blend those formats, look like doing a kind of training, but at the same time some coaching of the people and getting the results. So I started experimenting, and when this option appeared for Scrum.org, I was looking for try it, and I'm quite pleased of the results so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Martin, I hope I know you kind of kicked off this question. I hope you're prepared to dive a little bit deeper into how you feel about it, and also what do you think about the standard way of learning and who it's good for?
Yeah, that's a little. I guess that's a little bit of a loaded question, because I've always kind of felt that there was something not that great about the standard way of broadcast learning. I think although we do our best to try and make it as interactive as possible, and in person and in the virtual space, we use liberating structures, we use exercises, we use techniques to enable the participants to be as engaged as possible in the topic. We are effectively hosing them down with knowledge in a very, very short period of time. I had the same experience as Alex. Obviously, pre-pandemic, we were two full days only, pretty much. There was a little bit of experimentation going on, but pretty much almost mandated 2 full days. That was the way we did things. And then as soon as the pandemic hit and we started moving to the virtual format, it became really obvious that 2 full days kind of sucked. It wasn't really that great, right? Because people focusing in person, it's kind of a lot easier to tune out and rest your brain than it is when you're in the virtual space. It feels like we're more on. It feels like we're more under observation, because I think it feels like when it was a room full of people, everybody wasn't looking at everybody all of the time. But in the digital space, everybody can see everybody at the same time, and your eye can be drawn to that, that person that picks their nose. You can see it immediately in the corner of the screen, right? I'm just using a silly example. So it led to fatigue, a lot of fatigue in folks. And I tried to move very quickly away from the 2 full days, moved to 4 half days effectively, but they were still consecutive. And my intent was to then bring in additional learning opportunities, right? Can we have people engage in content and topics outside? We talked a lot about flipped learning, right? That experience where you can have people either watch, listen, or read or write content offline. I've done a few training courses like that, and I found that it's very hard from a trainer's perspective to get people to do the work. It's really hard to get them to do the work. You're fighting every single day, constantly doubling down, encouraging people to do the work, and then you get some percentage of people that do it. And it was just too much effort to maintain. It does in your psychological capability pretty quickly. So as soon as I started reading about the immersive, I definitely felt that is the thing that allows digital delivery, and being a bit vague, live digital delivery to differentiate itself, to do something different than we can do in person. And that's I think where we want to go.
Joanna, how was your experience? Was it kind of the same as Alex and Martin's, or a little bit different?
Well, in details, it's different, because in fact, I believe I was the first PST who was fully onboarded remote. I became a PST during COVID times. But I have also another experience. I used to be an academic teacher, and I can tell you, based on my experience, that you can teach people in different ways. However, my favorite, and based on the feedback from the students, their favorite way of working was a bit longer project with opportunities for inspection and adaptation. So in some cases, for instance, some of the learners are, give me a good book. So 2 days class might be, I believe, great equivalent of a book, even better, because you collaborate, you ask questions, you have feedback loop, right? And sometimes I have participants that come to the class with a list of questions, very specific questions. They are super prepared. And I believe we can still bring value with our traditional trainings. However, my preference is also to split, for instance, for 4 days instead of 2, because the fatigue, because of people losing focus is an important aspect. But with immersion classes, I found it powerful that people have a moment of reflection. So what I do typically after even traditional classes, you can always come back to me. Sometimes people wait 1 month, sometimes a few weeks. Sometimes a person came back after 6 months to close this learning club.
Yeah, that is the most important thing about the learning experience, I think, in my opinion, that once you've learned something and tried something and experimented with it, and being able to come back and reflect on what went well, what would you need more help with, who else could you go talk to, what could you try differently. And speaking of experimenting, I mean, because it's kind of an experimentation mindset and learning mindset are very similar. I'm curious how so immersion training kind of evolved for Scrum.org anyway, as you know, we've heard from so many professional Scrum trainers and PSTs that they were experimenting with different ways that people learn and trying to make learning more practical. So that's how immersion training was born. And I'm curious, I know each of you has had experience with that. What were some initial experiments that you tried, and how have those evolved over time? You know, where are you today with immersion training and making learning more practical? Start with Alex.
Okay, so as I was telling before, as soon as the virtual training was spread, I started to build my environment, and also inspired by Martin, having a learning management system. So I started to take care of the whole learning experience before, during, and after the training. So I provided them with a digital space so that they could start preparing for the course, seeing online videos, courses, doing assessments. So they could start warming up for the course. And yes, I did I only did a single 2-day course, and I didn't feel very well. So I started immediately back in 2020 into the 4 mornings, and it worked quite well. Now I'm moving into the 4 mornings divided on 2 weeks, because it looks like it's easier to integrate with the working rhythm of the people. And now I started adding more features of this online digital experience during the course and after the course. So they have assessments, they have more materials. I give them academically so that they can book time for me to ask for things. I ask them to prepare these things to try during the course, and I offer them to track them during 1 or 2 months after the course. So it was like starting to try to have a more continuous learning relationship together with them. And then I just tried the immersion program, and it looks like it's an enhancement for that, because what I'm really enlarging is this during course, and using the same murals learning management system, we establish an effective way of being in touch and learning to give them some feedback, preparing the next session. So we are not just meeting weekly, but also sometimes in an internal chat, having a more continuous communication. So yeah, that's my experience, and I started to grow, and I'm looking forward to really to see how things would evolve after the program, because it looks like there is an opportunity of starting longer term, perhaps mentoring or coaching of people.
Mhm. Sure. Yeah, so I'm curious, Alex, one more question for you, I guess, is what kind of behavioral change did you notice in students? You know, if you would compare an immersion, more practical learning experience compared to a standard learning experience.
Okay, definitely there are pros and cons.
Mhm.
During the 2 days, we try learning to be fun and very intensive, and you know, you have coffee, you have lunch, so it's very warm. I mean, and this is something I was lacking in the 2 days or 4 half mornings. It's a little bit colder. Also, it's hard for people to be really isolated from work. Even if I ask them before starting the training to set their out of the office mode and to shut down Slack and this, but it's still difficult for this multi-mode work we have nowadays, where you're doing many things at once. So it's hard to convince them in the average to really be focused. Even if I do 60-minute bursts of training, 10-minute break, and so on, this way I achieve to have more attention. But still, this is a challenge, and that was not happening in the 2-day courses. But in the immersive programs that run each Friday morning, at least for my first try, they are more relaxed because they think, okay, this is just morning at the week. So they are not so pressed to start to keep answering emails and so on. So I still have more, I think I have more attention from them, that being 4 mornings on a row, which I really understand that it's difficult to integrate within their business agendas.
Yeah, Joanna or Martin, do you have a similar experience or something? How do your experiences compare to what Alex just mentioned?
So I believe a lot of my experience is pretty similar, and I also have the same preference as Alex. However, I've learned that afternoon classes, like half days afternoon, is also a great alternative for some of the teams, some of the companies. And to avoid sugarcoating immersion classes, although I have academic background, teaching background, I love effective ways of learning. I have to say that still in some companies, teams, individuals, we observe some kind of mindset that this is too much when it comes to investment. So some people believe like, I want to go to the class, I just want to do it. And when they hear about our experiments, because spoiler alert, we are planning to do a bundle, for instance, PAL-E plus PAL-EBM, and it makes 12 weeks of short classes, short immersion experiences. Some of the people react with, oh my God, what an investment, right? But it's a journey, right? It's not like one shot, 1-2 days shot. It's a journey. Some people feel excited. Some people feel a fear. They don't want to dig into that.
Yeah, I think there's something important that you just mentioned is when we talk about immersion training or immersion program learning experiences, they are multiple weeks long. They're, you know, sometimes between 4 and 8 weeks long. It's really up to the trainer and the schedule that you choose. It could be weekly or bi-weekly even. So we are talking about an extended learning engagement. But one thing that I think is really important about that is every time you come together, you're coming away with something practical that you can apply at work the very same or next day. So it is over a longer period of time, but hopefully there's a ton of value that people are getting out of that and constantly gaining new practical skills. Martin looks like
yes, it's bringing empiricism to training, right?
Yeah.
So normally we don't have an empirical loop in our training process because we just have a big bang of training up front. We have 2 full days, and then thou shalt go off and do the thing that you need to do. And if you don't understand something, tough, figure it out. Here's some books, right? Or I've for a very long time, I've provided an extra hour of coaching, just included in all of my classes. But the percentage of people who actually use it is tiny. It's a great selling tool, right? But if people don't use it, it doesn't give value to people, and that's what we're really after. And I think
Like
that yeah, that we're effectively doing double loop learning, right? You're teaching them something, and then they go into their organization and try something, and we're being specific at what we want them to try. It's not as specific as maybe people are imagining that, oh, I've got to do this one thing. It's quite broad, but it's within a particular topic, because there's the reality that some people, the last immersion class that I ran, it was product owner, professional Scrum product owner, and I had five people in the class who were product owners, one person who was a Scrum master, and another person who was more, I guess, more product focused, but not a product manager. Bit weird, I know, but that's more where they sat rather than control. And I felt that for all of those different groups, the ability to go off and try something in your organization and then have that effectively 1 hour of coaching at the end to say, well, what did you do? How did it work? What did everybody else do? How did they feel about it? It was especially powerful. I had a group of 5 people who were from the same company, so they could collaborate amongst themselves when they're doing it, and they definitely broke up into smaller groups to be able to facilitate some of the things. And then they would come back, and one person would say, well, we tried to do this thing and it really didn't work. We didn't feel there's a way to do it. And then somebody else in the same organization was like, yeah, we had no problem. We were able to do that. We got it all set up. So that just art of the possible, demonstrating that different people were able to do things within the same context, I think is really, really powerful. And because you've got that double loop learning, that you're bringing that back, you're continuously adding to that loop. But it doesn't mean that the only time to bring up to close that loop is that one time at the debrief. Because at the next debrief, somebody might have a question at the end that related to the first session. And then at the third debrief, somebody might have another question that relates to the first session. And that continuous engagement for people to think about, to try things, to look at how it actually works out for them when they try and do it in their org, and then be able to come back and get feedback. That's the sweet spot. That's the gold in there.
Absolutely. There was something that you mentioned a bit earlier on, Martin, that's actually related to a question that we have in the chat. Any ideas on micro or nano learning, and what is the smallest element you can learn? You alluded to something about this earlier, right? Do you remember? Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I did. I think there's good points and there's bad points. I do a lot of micro learning. I go read blog posts. That's a mechanism of micro learning. You read a blog post, you watch a YouTube video, you then noodle on that, and then you come back to that topic. That's great, but it doesn't have structure. It doesn't have a cohesive, structured story that's trying to be told. If you think about the traditional shape of our courseware, right? You're effectively telling a coherent story that the number of times, I'm sure the other trainers have had exactly the same thing as this, but you're teaching the class and you're teaching a particular topic, and then somebody asks a question and you're like, well, and I guess when we're using slides, you flick to the next slide and there's the answer to that question. Because we're telling that story, there's a logical progression, there's a leading people towards different outcomes and ideas that I feel that you don't get with microlearning. And very much in what we're talking about, I find, and I guess this goes to the mechanisms of how does it actually work. practically. I found, because you've got a 4-hour slot, right, for each of the sessions over 8 to 12 weeks. That's what we were talking about. So you've got a 4-hour slot. I found that as much as the first 2 hours, 90 minutes to 120 minutes, were for the debrief, because there's 2 parts to the debrief, right? There's connecting people back to the story and then debriefing the exercise. And I think that connecting people back to the story, that in and of itself, even if we just did that and we didn't have an exercise and an exercise debrief, that a week later, reconnect to the story, they start coming up with questions about the things that we talked about the previous week that they hadn't thought of at the time, and then they bring up a week later, and then you jump into the debrief. So it means that the amount of net new content that we're hosing people down with, right, is actually only 90 to 120 minutes. It's not really much more than that. So a couple of hours worth of content, which is a movie, is a YouTube video, is a consumable amount of content.
Very small amount. Yeah. And each immersion assignment is quite focused also. So even though you're learning about an hour and a half to 2 hours of new content, your immersion assignment is very targeted on a specific outcome, for example, with examples, given examples of ways you could do that, and also creativity and how to get to that outcome. There is actually another question in the chat that I'd love to dig into that actually ties into something else I would love to carry on with. So Deborah asks, have you found any good ways to assess the effectiveness of the training other than quizzes? So this, I believe, there's the quizzes. I think some trainers utilize quizzes in their sessions. There's, of course, their certifications and assessments that we offer at the end of training to validate your learning. And what other ways would we know that our training is effective? I have an opinion about it, but it's not my show, right? Joanna, I would love to know what your opinion is about it, or your experiences about it.
That's a fantastic question. And by the way, Sabrina, I would love to hear your opinion too.
Sure.
You are the part of our learning process today, right? So for me, personally, I don't care much about quizzes and certification, but I do care about the actual impact on individuals, teams, and organization. So for me, a great feedback loop as a trainer is how many experiments the team, this individual, the organization was able to conduct. Do they see any changes in what is important for them? Effective changes in their processes. So this is something that I'm looking for, and honestly, I'm happy when someone comes back after the class and they are not telling like, oh my God, assessment was difficult. They are having very good questions, like we did that experiment, we did this change, and I'm looking for your feedback. I want to collaborate on that.
For sure. Alex, what is by the way, Joanna, yeah, you and I think are pretty aligned on that. So similar opinions. Alex, how about you? Are you aligned with me and Joanna, or you have a different opinion?
Well, I am aligned, and I would like to add that following on Martin's concept of what we do at the beginning of the sessions, we do not just continuate the narrative and we set the scene for the next session. But for me, it's very important 2 things. The first one is that there are some things that pop up, some questions that are maturing during the week, and it's a very nice time in this first part to review those questions. The thing is that during 2 days, you are packing a lot of information and a lot of things on the mind of people, but our mind is not able to process everything. And when we are at work or trying things, new questions come up to our mind, and we can discuss them at the beginning of the session. And The thing is that for me, I would like to go a little bit back to my previous experience. I was eager to know what was happening with people attending the standard classes, and I did a UX research, so a set of surveys with past students, and they say that most of them, they were really applying practices. So I was really happy because I was not aware of that. But the thing that it took more effort for them was the change management within their organization. And I think one of the biggest advantage of this new format is that you are not only helping them to try new practices, but you and the rest of the class are helping them to come up with ideas, to work around issues, or to try things or tactics in order to make things happen. Still, I don't want neither to sugarcoat this because it's really hard. And another thing I would like to say is that, for example, 1 week is a short time frame to try things. Sometimes I say, okay, do not feel too pressed. The thing is that we reflect on the concepts we are presenting. Either you can try it or not. Sometimes you start thinking about the topic and discussing it with a stakeholder, and perhaps you can start really trying that 2, 3, or 4 weeks later. So we are not trying to make everything happen in 2 months. It's just a matter of helping them to not to be alone in front of hard endeavor to change things.
Yeah, you've touched on a couple of things that I want to key in on a little bit, Alex. There's there's this thing that we talk about constantly with immersion training, a 15% solution. What's the smallest possible thing that you can start with, just to get started, right? You don't have to tackle the whole thing all at once, and you don't have to do it alone. And that was the second point I wanted to ask you about, is the student experience, and what you've noticed or heard from your students who participate in an immersion training, and how that unlocks creativity amongst the participants and each other, and their ability to help each other and interact with each other and support each other through this experience. Do you have anything you'd like to share, or experiences from students that have come back and told, or anything that you've noticed from your students in your classroom and their engagement with each other?
Yes, I think since they have a greater intimacy because they are together with a program of many weeks, and they try things and they share. So there is a bigger. My immersive program was open, not just for in company, but open. And even if they work for separate companies, they do not hesitate that much to share things. I was worrying that they may be reluctant to share details, and they are sharing things, sharing good things, issues, struggles. So I think there is it creates a good environment for collaboration and empathy between them. So I'm really happy for that.
Joanna or Martin, do you have a similar kind of any stories or observations from your students in the classroom of an immersion training, with, how did they support each other? Any creativity that kind of unleashed in that kind of experience?
I think I want to double down what Joanna said. It's feedback that is the important thing. So whether I sometimes don't like saying it this way, but whether people pass the assessment at the end, I don't really care, right? When I'm training them, I want them to have valuable outcomes in their organization. I want them to feel like I hate this phrase. I want them to feel empowered to be able to do stuff, like they're excited and engaged in the topics and the ideas. And if I can recount a short story from a previous class. One of the groups, remember I said that I had the PSPO and it had 5 people from the same company. 4 of them ended up in one of the sessions. They'd gone to Romania to work with some of the engineering teams as product owners. So they were, instead of it being like 2 till 6, it was 4 till 8 p.m. was the training. And then they were going out for like a company dinner. And the CEO emailed me after that dinner to effectively say that he was expecting them to be, drained and unhappy, hungry, and grumpy, right? Because they'd been in training till 6 p.m. With jet lag, with all of those things. And that was not the experience that he had. He had a bunch of people turn up after the class, turn up at this meeting, at this dinner, and be engaged in discussing what can we do differently in the organization, what are the different things that we can try, why is this not working, why is that not working, how can we do this. And I think that excitement and engagement, when you're teaching a 2 full day class, you get once at the end of the class, maybe twice, end of the first day, end of the second day. But if we can do that 8 times over 8 weeks, have people engaged and excited about the topic and the content, then that starts to build muscle memory that you don't get from the shorter classes. It starts to get people it's like continuous reinforcement of the ideas, because there is a theme running through all agile training of empiricism, right? Empiricism, lean, those tools that are the foundation of it all are true in every segment. So we're building muscle memory around lean. We're building muscle memory around empiricism, around inspect and adapt, around collect the data, look at the telemetry, what's actually going on. Can you actually see, is there transparency, right? And that creates a lot more momentum. That's the word I'm looking for. A lot more momentum in the organization, that I think people start engaging a lot more with the topic, with the ideas, and trying to move it forward themselves. I think I answered your question. I may have gone on a tangent.
No, that's all right. Joanna, did you have anything to add to this?
Well, a lot of great things were already said, and we've heard obvious things. I would love to add one more: habits. So in the neuroscience, we learn more and more that creating habits, effective habits, is something that can be a differentiator for companies. And if you, either in the public or in the private class, you decided to go into immersion mode, you actually create a habit of regular small experiments. So if this is something new for you, with this format, you can start an important journey and you can build those behaviors after the class. You may continue that journey because you've already learned the approach, and you also get used to that. So I would say it's additional gift that we as trainers can give to the participants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sabrina, I just wanted to note, Nick in the comments asked a question about Target Dojo.
Yeah, please.
And he asked if that influenced the learning approach that we're talking about, and if so, how. I think it didn't, but that doesn't mean that I'm saying anything against Target Dojo. In fact, since I started down this immersive learning journey, which is what Scrum.org calls it, other people call it cohorts, right? But I think there's a lot more structure around immersive learning. I had experience with both, a little bit with the Target Dojo, but also with Microsoft's DevOps Dojo as well. They have a similar thing that they deliver inside of their organization to teams and to customers. And it is the same idea. And I think you're going to continuously and more expansively see this change across all of learning industry and learning outcomes, where we're moving towards this idea of continuous reinforcement over a longer period of time, rather than trying to hose everybody down with new knowledge.
I agree.
Hopefully that, Nick.
Yeah, that's I agree completely. There's when we were thinking about building immersion training, I mean, this is based on, I think, a ton of conversations and what we're seeing PSTs trying with their students and their learning experiences. And I mean, our community right now is about 360 plus PSTs, and I can't even count how many people we talk to, but the general theme for a long time was, especially starting in COVID, was how do we make learning more practical? So people were calling them dojos or deeper learning experiences or boot camps, or, all of it, pick your poison for a name, right? But there was that one theme, was how to make it more practical, which is kind of what immersion training hopes to do. Yeah, thanks for calling out that question. It's a fantastic question. There's another question also I saw that that's a little bit of a tricky one in my opinion, but I'm curious, Joanna, if you have any experience with this. So there's a question: how would you advise to use immersive learning for Scrum Masters during the regular work with teams, apart from standard events in Scrum? So how could a Scrum Master in their real world take the concept of immersion learning or immersion training and help their teams improve? I think, is if I'm interpreting that correctly.
Oh, that's an amazing question. Love that. Actually, I would say this is what I used to do. And I believe many great Scrum Masters do. So if they realize that there is a topic that we as a team, as an organization, we have to deep dive, they split it into smaller parts, they share knowledge, they prepare some exercises, and then there is application part. We have some time, like maybe a sprint, maybe a two, to play with that idea, to practice, for instance, creating effective sprint goals, and then reflection, inspection, adaptation, and we are moving forward. So in fact, the great Scrum Master can plan some kind of immersion experience for the company for weeks or even months to help everyone understand and really use this new knowledge in this professional environment.
I just got goosebumps a little bit thinking about, like, Scrum Masters in the real world taking immersion training and applying it with their teams. That wow.
I think it's also important to address that the immersion classes are not just for beginner Scrum Masters, and they're not just for, we're using Scrum Masters as an example. It could be Agile leaders, it could be product owners. It's not just for beginners or just for people who've been doing the job for a long time. Yeah. Both of those different groups get something different out of the training. The person who's the beginner gets a guide and help, not just from us as the facilitator, right? The PST is the facilitator, but also from their colleagues in the training who may have a little bit more experience to talk about and engage in different topics and talk about the things that they've tried. It starts to build, like Alex was talking about, that little bit of a community of practice just within the context of that training class, that we're all willing to share and air our dirty laundry a little bit in order to get to the outcomes, that the behavioral changes and the impacts that we would like to see in the organizations that we're in. And I think both beginner folks and advanced folks can get something out of that. Absolutely.
I do have one more question. Maybe we'll have time for two more questions before we wrap up, but I'm really curious to get to this one. Bringing it back to, immersion versus standard training, or maybe not versus, right? They're both fantastic learning experiences, but there was a question in the chat that after experiencing an immersive training, did any student ever give the feedback that they would have preferred a 2-day consecutive training, a regular format training instead? Have you ever heard that from any of your students?
I'm going to say very much the opposite. I've only heard it from people who have never been on an immersive class. If they've
Yeah.
not been on it, they don't know what they're missing. They don't know what it actually. It's actually difficult for us to describe what is this actual immerse. How does it feel to be in that class and get that help and get that close those learning loops? And all, maybe I could use a quote from one of my students from the last one. This was on the last session of the PSPO, and they said, "What are we going to do next week?" What are we going to do next week? Well, we don't have a session next week. What are we going to do? We would like to have another session next week. And that, I think, is a bigger bonus there.
Wrapping it, going back to the habit forming and making sure that you make space to learn every single sprint. I know we talk about it all the time, but that feels like a lot, like you've kind of helped those students build that habit, and now they're just, maybe they'll plan for it in their future sprints on their own.
Could we do all the courses back to back and get 52 weeks?
Maybe. There's one comment from Nick in the chat. He's a former Scrum Master that they've been offering immersive learning at Discover for 18 months. And the experiences that we're sharing here, that you all are sharing, has been super reaffirming with the approaches that they've taken. So that's really awesome to hear. Thank you for sharing, Nick. I guess we could wrap it up with, are there other student experiences or experiences that students have reported back to the three of you about their immersive training experience and how that's impacted them? Alex?
I just may add that we try to explain very well to the candidates what is the immersive learning all about. It is related to if they regret having go through this program. The thing is that I have let's say 95% of attendance rate. I mean, they are very rarely skip a session for personal reasons. And it means that they are enjoying and they are ready to do that. There may be another, and I know them, there are other people that do prefer to get a very intensive experience and go to the assessment and so on. So it's very important that they are aware of the type of experience, and that those who attended the immersive program, they were really enthusiasts and trying to get things changing in their organization. So it looks like there are different learning styles as you frame it in the beginning of the session. And I would like to stand that. This is important to be aware which is your learning style.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Martin or Joanna, do you have any closing remarks about, student experiences?
I would totally agree with Alex, and I haven't had anybody have a bad experience with the immersive learning, but I very rarely had anybody with a bad experience with the 4 half-day learning that I was doing before. And part of that is down to the trainers, right? The making it an engaging, funny experience. I worked with a trainer many years ago who said that he wasn't a trainer, he was an NTU trainer, right? There's a certain amount of entertainment that's part of it, and keeping people engaged and happy is part of that story, and that's what makes a great facilitator of a course. But I think this format really multiplies that effect of people being able to make, as Joanna put it, actual change the outcomes that they have in the organization.
Joanna, I want to hear your response. And while you're responding, Joanna, Martin, think really hard about what your favorite board game is. And then you'll have like 5 seconds to respond, and then we got to wrap up. Joanna.
So I will share 2 feedbacks that made me think that we should start immersion classes. First feedback is from the fantastic lady. She was super committed during the class, and she said, "Oh my God, Joanna, I don't know where to start because it's too much." So she was amazed and at the same time so scared how she gonna use this class, this knowledge. And that was very important lesson for me. And the second one It was after my PAL E class. It was in a traditional way. The student is calling me. He's really insisting on feedback session. Okay, let's talk. And I'm waiting for some difficult feedback, honestly, because I was curious and having different thoughts. And what he said was as follows. Joanna, that was an amazing class. Great content. But when I eat lunch, I simply fall asleep. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
So that was also important lesson that he was super committed, but for maybe 5 hours. But after that, he was simply, brain dead. So I believe immersion classes are for those who simply are brain dead after a few hours of such an experience. And our classes have a lot of content. Let's be honest with each other.
Very interactive. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in them. So I really appreciated the discussion today. I hope everybody listening did also. I'm going to share the screen really quickly again and just throw this out there. Joanna, Alex, and Martin all deliver immersion training classes. I hope that was evident from the conversation today. But if you would like to get in touch with them or check out their training schedules coming up, you can visit them on Scrum.org. You can also just search for their names in the Find a Trainer page, but there are quick links on the screen here. And feel free to reach out to any of them. You can reach out to myself also. My name is Sabrina Love. It's really simple. It's sabrina.love@scrum.org. Otherwise, if we didn't get to any of your questions today, hopefully we can do maybe a blog post after, or we can follow up individually or something of the like. But thank you all for attending today. And if you're watching later, we hope this video was helpful in your understanding of immersion training, and we hope to see you at a future class. Thank you very much. And
for Sergey in the chat,
yeah,
it's
yes. This one. What is this one? I can't see it.
Teotihuacan, City of the Gods.
Gotcha. Why is it your favorite? And then we'll go.
Really complicated. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, strategic.
It's a strategy game. It's a economic simulated strategy game.
Awesome. Next time we're in person, bring it. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for today. Thank you for watching after. If you have any questions about immersion training, please feel free to, go to Scrum.org, contact myself, get in touch with Joanna, Alex, Martin. We're all here if you have questions and follow up. All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.